So it's not about just technological divide, but it's also about your... But what about, like you were talking about civil society and...
I mean, new media, I'll see, if all other avenues were shut, then new media would be the only option, because at least it escapes censorship. I mean, you can put your things on and nobody's there to tell you. I mean, in rare cases, they will crack down even on the internet, but most of the time you can do anything you like on the internet. While with films, every time I make a film, it's a struggle. I have to go through the censor board, I have to fight with them, eventually try to get my films on Doordarshan, fight with Doordarshan, etc. So it's a long battle. For me, that battle has been worthwhile, even though it's been long drawn out and painstaking. Because eventually I was able to win those cases.
But then, don't you think that if you would have actually shown those films in this new media, say on YouTube, then you would have been able to circumvent censorship, and it would have been far easier for you to reach your audience?
No. Very tiny audiences on the internet, as far as I can see. I mean, unless it's some flashy things get big eyeballs, but if a documentary film of this kind doesn't, a few thousand people watching it on the internet is not worthwhile. It has to be it would be attractive if it was millions.
So how would you reach these? How do you reach these millions?
I don't think through the computer in India as yet.
No, but as a filmmaker, how do you reach your audience?
As I said, I've been doing it by going to court against Doordarshan.
Yeah, because suppose from my personal point of view, I can say that when your film gets shown on Doordarshan, they don't advertise it.
They don't advertise it. They don't want to show it.
You don't get to know that your film is being shown. I have not seen Father, Son and Holy War on Doordarshan. I've only seen... I can't even remember what film of yours I've seen on
Doordarshan. The Doordarshan... again, the Doordarshan audience that watches my films is an accidental audience, meaning that they didn't know the film was going to be on.
Right.
One sudden morning they suddenly found it. In fact, even when I won my court case against Doordarshan and they had to telecast it, they cheated in the sense that they announced that War and Peace would be shown at 10 o'clock at night, and they showed it at 10 o'clock in the morning on Sunday.
Okay.
I didn't have the energy to fight another court case for them having cheated in that way, but that's what they did. They really don't want people to see these films.
So then how will you reach your...
But I still think that even the accidental audience must have been in the millions. And for instance, when Headlines TV showed Ram Ke Naam, as you said, it was only once. They went to show it 3 times. That must have got millions of people also.
But then that's again cable television.
Yeah. So Doordarshan would have been much greater audience.
Yeah. And what about mainstream release, festivals in India? What have been your experience with?
Mainstream release, I've once tried it, again with War and Peace. I think it was 2006. We hired 2 multiplexes in Bombay, and just as an experiment, we also had to hire a video projector, because those theatres didn't have video projectors in those days. So our expenses were very high. We had to get good quality projection, and we got, in the monsoons they gave us the theatres because their audiences are low anyway, especially during exams. So we were expected to have no audience, but we had house full on many days. So within in 2 weeks we were able to break even. Okay. We didn't lose any money because we had enough ticket sales.
Anand, again I have to talk about the audience because...
anyway, that I just given as an example. I didn't have the money power to do this on a big scale. Right. But if there was a distributor, I don't think it would be economically unviable to take a documentary like this and distribute it in theatres. I think it's actually possible. It just needs somebody with the guts to do it.
Right. And what about reaching the rural audience? Like when we see Ram Ke Naam, there is this sequence where you're actually interviewing some daily workmen about what is the significance of this whole Rath Yatra to their lives. Now suppose if you were to show your film to these people on whom you've made, how do you do that? How is it possible?
Well, let me say that whenever I have shown it to working class audiences, it may not be rural in the village. Sometimes we've done that. But we've often done it in urban slums.
Okay.
of course, we show the Hindi version. I have two versions of all my films. I have a Hindi voiceover version and an English subtitle version. Actually, the people keep asking me, your films work with middle class people. Say that your films, we understand them, but the same thing will be misunderstood by others. They might get aroused into communal violence or watching the kind of things we show. And my experience is quite the opposite. I think that the understanding that I've seen in working class audiences is actually greater than in the elite audiences. Elite audiences, the communal poison in our country has reached the elite much faster than it's reached working class audiences. They understood what the film was trying to say very well, right away, without any prompting.
So how do you organize these screenings for them?
But then again, that is the challenge, and that usually is done through activist groups. That is done through where organizations like NAPM and other people were in movements that I've been associated with over the years, or other people invite me to go somewhere, or I don't go myself, but the film reaches in these places. And I think the films, I actually honestly I don't even know the kind of dissemination some of these films have had. It's much bigger than you may imagine, because DVDs are made and then DVDs are copied, and they're all over the place.
Lots so you're perfectly okay with piracy?
Pardon?
Perfectly okay with piracy?
I'm okay with people who can't afford it and they pirate it. But if they can afford it, they should pay for it, because somebody has to pay for the films to be made eventually.
Right. Okay. When we see some Iranian films or Latin American films like Fernando Solanos and many others, we see that the line between documentary and fiction gets blurred. There's this whole concept of docu-fiction. So have you ever thought of doing something in this genre?
Personally, I'm much more comfortable with things that I find than things that I create, in the sense that of course one creates even while editing, in the sense that one juxtaposes things and brings meaning which may be latently there but is not obvious. But in fiction, one is actually, even docu-fiction, even fiction based on real events, it involves a leap of imagination which maybe I don't have, in the sense that making something that, imagining something that may have happened this way. I prefer to discover the things that are already there, because I find them fascinating enough not to have to invent it myself.
So what have been your influences, cinematic, literary or otherwise?
It's very hard. I don't think I'm conscious about the influences in that sense, because it's not one single book or one single movie or anything like that. It's probably, my influences is the time that I grew up. I mean, I was 20 in 1970.
The JP movement?
Not just the JP movement. I got a scholarship. I was in America in 1970 when the Vietnam War was going on. So I was part of the anti-war movement there. And that was as influential, I guess, as anything else. And that whole atmosphere of social change and political change, that was sweeping the whole world, not just America. You had the same phenomena in India as well.
Right. And what is the last film that you've seen and you can remember?
The last film that I've seen, meaning good or bad, or
both ways. We would be interested in a bad film that you've seen and we would like you to rail about it.
No, actually, I've been so preoccupied with my own work that I don't. I see films late at night on TV just before going to bed. So it's not as if I'm paying attention that much.
Yeah. So these films they are not good enough to draw your attention?
No, they're not meant to be good enough. They're meant to be. Yeah.
Okay, I'll leave it at that. And what are your future projects?
Even that I don't want to talk about till it's done, because I've been working on a film for the last 14 years now.
14 years?
Yeah. So I should be ready sometime this year.
How many more years?
No, I should be ready this year.
Okay, this year. Okay.
So I will talk to you about that after it's done.
It was a pleasure talking to you, Anand. Thanks so much.
Yeah.